Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week we're going into mass production with the little plywood totes. See you in a minute. Right, so having made the tote carry case thing out of plywood the other day, a couple of things have come up. There was a suggestion that we might make some to sell at the shed, which would be good because it'll mean we're using up the material and getting some return for it. But we've also had an approach and some funding from, I think it's Rotary Group, I'm not sure who are talking about whether we can produce kits of parts for people to make for something to do, either children, dementia sufferers, all sorts of things. So I spent a couple of days at the shed making all of the parts that we need to make 20 of these, with a view to sort of productionizing it and putting it into a reasonably permanent basis of making these things. And cutting the stuff out is easy enough, as long as you do all of your cuts for the base and the sides and the carry handle on a circular saw or something at the same time. They're all the same length, and that's really the main critical length. The other critical length is from the center handle to the sides to get the partitions, and I think I've got that right, so that we know where we are in terms of that. However, when I was putting it together, I found it was quite difficult. You could find a centre line and put the carry handle in reasonably well, but it wasn't ideal, and you could then put those either side, but there wasn't a lot of location about any of it, and it was all too easy to get it sort of a bit wrong. So I spent a few minutes playing around and decided that if we routed out the grooves in this base material, that would make it much easier to slot these things into. So I've been messing around with finding suitable router bits. I'm somewhere between a 5/16 and a 3/8 and struggling a bit, but I think when we get there we will. But if we put a cross route down the middle and one up either side there, that will actually form the basis for people to be able to just click them together that way, like an IKEA unit almost. But it'll also just take all the worry out of it as to where things are in terms of length and things like that, and then you can then just drop your sides and ends on afterwards. So that's the first thing I want to do. The other thing is cutting out the handles, and again what I need to do now is make a jig or some means of just holding that so that I can then clamp them together and then run round roughly with a bandsaw and a hole saw perhaps first, but then run round with the router bit just to get all those edges exactly the same size. Then we can just move on, round over all the top edges and the ends as we need to, and we'll have ourselves a little set of parts that either we can store for future sales, which means that it doesn't take up much room, like that, or we can sell them on as kits, or use the funds that we've been given to provide them with kits. And because we've got so much of the plywood, hopefully we can then expand that idea onto other things. I'm looking at trays and other things like that that will be useful things for people to make. So back at the shed, it was very much a case of repeating what I'd done before, but on a slightly more industrial scale, cutting all the pieces of timber out and then making up a jig, first of all to do the routing for the bases. It took a bit of time to get right because I needed the actual groove to be dead in the middle, bearing in mind that there's a piece either side that's got to also be cut the same. But once that was done, it meant that I've got the repeatability to be able to do these things time after time after time, and that's the whole, really the whole point of it. And doing the jigs, they take a disproportionate time to set up, it may seem, but once you actually get into production, by the time you've made 3 or 4 of them, you've more than caught up that time. I can now push these things out in a matter of seconds and they're all the same. Okay, I've now got a jig made for the bases. All I need to do now is to slide a piece of timber in there, run the router from one side to the other in the groove across, and that should work okay. And then to get the side pieces, move it to there. Again, need clamping down, but work from the centre out with the rig and turn it round. Same again, across there, run it across, and that way I can get the repeatability that we need, because I want to get 20 of these done and I want them all to be the same. So that's the next step. That will probably take the longest time of all, I think, on this, getting these routed out. Once that's done, we're pretty much there. Done. And again, I may do a similar sort of thing that will hold the timber above the piece that I cut, to sort of clamp them together so that I can then just quickly run round with the router and get that done as a one pass type of thing with the router. I'll need to make one of these without the rounded over edges though, I think, just to get the ball bearing running on the face properly, to cut those out. So the second jig needed the handle remaking effectively, so rather than just using a pair of old paint tins to get the curves, I actually got the compasses out and did what I hope was a slightly more scientific job to get all the curves right. But this one obviously didn't have to have the rounding over on the top, because it had got to have the follower bearing on the router bit to cut out the one underneath. This is basically just a template, so it was the same process as before. Drill the holes out with a Forstner bit, cut the middle bit out with a scroll saw, and then cut the shape with a bandsaw and file it all, smooth it all, sand it to shape, and then I could start and make the jig to hold the template and a piece beneath it, and then you can just router straight through from one to the other. Once that's done, I can just clamp the blank into the bottom, put the template on top, and with effectively 2 passes of the router, because I just take a relatively shallow cut to start with and then take a second cut afterwards, but with it clamped down you can just whip round the outside, whip round the handle inside, and you've got yourself a repeat identical copy, and then you can carry on and do the next 20 or so without any problems. Right, now I've got the first 3 kits I've brought home to have a go at and see how they go together. More than anything I want to take some sort of pictures as we go, so that we can do a little instruction sheet for them if they're going out as a kit of parts. But more importantly, I want to make sure that it's something that can be assembled without any other tools. We've got the revised base that's now got the grooves in it, so that should completely de-skill the assembly. Just give it a quick sand down, and then that just pops into there. Easily enough, and then we just glue the end of the side pieces. Hopefully these will fit better together because they were machined together. Need a little block in the kit, I think, so that people can get the vertical right on that. But certainly it's something which we can mass produce and assemble quickly, and somebody who has no facilities or particularly any great skill or anything can slam one of these together pretty quickly, and that just clamps itself up square almost as we go. Right, we'll clean that up and then move on to the next one. So that's effectively how we've put these things into production. It may seem a bit of a bother to get all these jigs made, but just to put it into context, it took me about 4 hours to make the first caddy, and it probably would not have taken me a lot different to make the second or third one, and knowing my usual skill, they'd have all been different. It took me, I think, about 16 to 20 hours to set all this lot up, get all the parts cut, but I also in that time cut out the parts to make another 20, and it didn't take me much longer to stick 6 of them together and varnish them. So we've got a product that we can now use. It's already been out at one of the craft fairs, and I think we sold 5 of the 6 on the first couple of days of that, so we know that they will hopefully sell. We've also got another inquiry that is people that have got a group of folks that they need to look after that want to come down to the shed and do something, so we're going to assemble again the same thing, a set of parts, set aside the Fridays that we don't normally open, and probably once a month we'll get groups in, hospice care, all sorts of things like that, that can come along and make something and go away with it at the end of the day. So it's proving a useful sort of product, and hopefully as we've got all the material and can get more of it, it's something that's sustainable and we can plan around it, which is something we haven't been able to do for a long while. So I hope it was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll try and do something different. I'll see you then. Bye.